We come together to share and grow. And I couldn't be more excited to welcome you guys here today to the Pyramid Club, to what is now our grant's 18th event? 19th event of a grant that Sierra Group Foundation was awarded by the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council in April of 2015. It was a 2-year grant extendable for a 3rd year, multi-state, and the purpose of today's presentation is one of those grant-funded projects, is to help eradicate the stigma that exists and continues to exist in today's society about employing and hiring people with disabilities. We're going to talk at the beginning of the day today a lot about stigma when it comes in the form of our unconscious bias. None of us here would have shown up today if we thought, hey, maybe I've got some stigmas, I'm going to go there and try to cure them. That's not what happens. You guys are here because you believe and you buy in, and you're at your jobs in your various companies that are represented here today. You're the one that's beating the drum saying inclusion works and inclusion is good for everyone. We're hoping to give you some additional tools by hitting a little bit harder than usual on the topic of unconscious bias and stigma, so that we can see, like disability is a naturally occurring part of the human condition, so is bias based on what we're exposed to. You know, the law of exposure says you think most about what you're most exposed to. In the past 20-some years since the ADA passed and businesses started proactively recruiting and hiring people with disabilities, unfortunately slow progress has occurred. The heat's been turned up and the activities are on the rise, and we know that by sharing practical tips and tools to recruit and accommodate, that fabulous companies like those of you represented today are going to do more of it. And set goals for this employer-focused employment project included to engage more than 20 exemplary employers, and we have 31 to date. So not to say we're overachievers, you guys are the ones that are overachieving. It's our friends here from Independence Blue Cross, Comcast, all the other organizations represented that will be giving a nice shout out before the day is out. It's because of all of this. Chris, I'm looking for my accomplishments slide. It's only on my notes, right? Okay, here we go. Achievements to date, 31 mentors. We exceeded our goal of 20. 18 live events. We were supposed to have 7 by now. Yeah, okay. Again, we're not overachievers. We've got a lot going on. Having you guys over for breakfast is a lot of fun, but at the same time, the reason we're doing it is more and more organizations are inviting us to go to them and do these types of events for them at their location. More and more of you are stepping up and saying, I want to be an employer mentor. I want to host activities. Our friends at Comcast have started taking this to another level with the employee resource group involvement. And a group of businesses come together there now quarterly to talk about how employee resource groups can better promote inclusion. Inclusion is inclusion. And we love that the opportunity to share is growing like wildfire. So we appreciate you being here. I'd like to introduce my friend, my esteemed fellow presenter, and a gentleman who literally, he walks the walk, he knows the action, he lives it in his heart and soul every minute. Michael Furman, Principal Consultant of HR Resolve, has 35 years of human resources experience at leading global companies, including senior level positions with Teva Pharmaceuticals, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Bankers Trust, GlaxoSmithKline, and Pfizer. You might have heard of a couple of those companies. Michael is now a consultant on fair employment practices, focusing on how a company's words and actions can align with their policies. Well, how perfect for our topic today. Michael chairs the Philadelphia Industry Liaison Group, commonly known as the ILG. The chapter that I'm proud to be a part of focuses on compliance issues for federal contractors too. So let's look at the agenda quickly, and then Michael and I will get right to the topic. Today, we definitely are talking about how we're going to eradicate the stigma. We're going to recognize maybe a couple places where we might hold it. We're going to view inclusion, well, more inclusively. When the Developmental Disabilities Council in Pennsylvania wants to see generic change, where no one says, isn't it amazing that that person who's visually impaired came to work today? I have a visual impairment. It's not that amazing I came to work today. It's my job. I don't show up for work, I don't have a job. Just like the rest of us. What's amazing is that we can and will reach that degree of inclusion. How are we going to do it? By coming together. Michael Furman, that's enough of my philosophy. Yeah. You come on up here and share your expertise. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Janet. One of the things that's nice about partnering with the Sierra Group is that I know that as an organization that they connect to people individually in a way that helps success. And for many of us who work at organizations, we deal with platforms, we deal with programs, we deal with slogans and ideas and policies. To have a partner like the Sierra Group is a way to be successful because they help with the individual activities that get people across from being just a good idea to being reality as a successful worker. Okay? So it's nice to have a partner like that. The other thing I would say for us around the spirit of what we're talking about is that we're going to look at some of the components that make this up, but the companies that are most successful are the ones that are not focused just on the rules, and the companies that are not focused on what bucket this is or what guideline it is. The companies that are successful fit more under doing the right thing and helping people. And so when you think about accommodations and you think about identification, we're going to talk a bit about it. There are rules and guidelines, but the people who are successful are the ones that think, I just need to get to a good place. And so we're going to talk about how we navigate doing that. But I want to give you just a broad idea of you have to open your mind, not about the rules, but about what are we trying to accomplish. And so, for me in the work that I do, I look at, we have policies that say good things, but how do we actually accomplish that? And a lot of times our systems, our processes, our communications don't reinforce what we're really trying to accomplish. So let's start at that high level, keep your mind there as to what it is, why we're here, and what the purpose is, and then we can move forward. So the stigma quiz.
Yes, the stigma quiz is on the internet, funded by another developmental disabilities grant in Pennsylvania. And we're going to quickly go through this. If everybody has a pen and paper near them, or if you just want to make the answer in your head, we're going to go through these questions that are designed to tickle your inner beliefs. And for those of you here that are probably going to do a great job on the quiz, this is a resource online that you can share with your teams. It's a great sensitivity and team building exercise. So, question number 1. And don't worry, Michael, Chris, and I all got one question wrong first time we took it. So, question number 1. Disabled people are courageous and brave for getting up every day, facing their challenges and struggles. True or false? False. Anybody think true?
All right.
True?
A little bit of truth.
True-ish.
All right.
I might have given away that answer in my opening. Check the answer. It's false. People with disabilities are often portrayed as superhuman, sometimes I am, or courageous, in my own mind, or courageous as they triumph over adversity in their daily life. Their only flaw is that a disabled person doesn't consider brushing their teeth, eating, or daily living an act of heroism, so why would you? Be real and let somebody getting up just be getting up, and not Superman triumphing over evil. You don't have to agree with the stigma quiz, but it's interesting that you wonder what the answer to that question is. It goes to the point of we all hold ideas for what we believe are the right reason, but sometimes the idea for the right reason might lead a person to stigmatize. I recently took over ownership of all aspects of Sierra Group individually. I formerly ran it with my partner, who was my husband. My own family said to me, "How are you going to do that by yourself?" I said, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Oh, a woman?" I'm like, "Okay, I love you, but first off, I'm not by myself. Like, the entire staff is there, and we're growing and we're expanding." But literally, people who loved and supported me always had the, "Ooh, a girl all by herself, I don't know, maybe you should think about getting a job." I'm like, "I have one. I like my job." So sometimes bias is there. Question number 2, employees with disabilities have higher absentee rates. True or false? False. Congratulations, you are right. Research by DuPont has found that the average employee with a disability has better attendance. Better, let's take note of that. I know I'm supposed to not be touting heroism, but I'm an employer. I like it when people come to work. Next question. It's unlikely you will ever meet a person who has a mental illness. True or false? The false has it. Congratulations, you're right that it's false. Mental illness will not discriminate and is surprisingly common. According to a 2013 fact sheet by the Center for Disease Control, published studies report 25% of all adults in our country have a mental illness. Nearly 50% will develop at least one mental illness during their lifetime. Good answer. Typically, a person with mental illness has a lower level of intelligence. True or false? False. Intelligence has nothing to do with mental illness or brain disorder. People with mental disorders can be brilliant, creative, and productive people. Some people with mental disorders do not exhibit these qualities. That's because people are people. Overall, the level of intelligence among people with mental illness parallels the pattern seen in any population. Next up, we should be inspired and motivated by seeing disabled people accomplishing goals such as playing sports, working, living alone, etc. Inspired and motivated, what do you think? I think Special Olympics when I think of this, inspiring, motivating. The Olympics overall is special. True or false? What do we have?
What's the hard ball?
Yeah, we're not sure. Somebody answer. What, Michael, what do you think their answer is?
True.
True. Let's think again. It's false. People with disabilities are just like you and me. Now again, this is one that's subject to your own internal interpretation. But the people that put together the stigma test, that did a lot of research about stigma and how it affects us, I don't think it's wrong to think an athlete is a success. Right. I think maybe they're going to, don't be so surprised that a person with a disability can also be that really successful athlete.
Right. If you're impressed by Michael Phelps, why is that different? Well, he has a long torso. Is that a disability? Not the way we categorize. So why wouldn't you just...
It gets there fast.
Well, it is. It's part of why his mechanics and he's world class. But the idea is that I'm impressed with somebody who wins a race. Doesn't matter, right? And I think that's part of what they're saying is why do we have to differentiate? Just say, look, if people are good at what they do, then that's what it's about.
Definitely. All right, next. Statistics show employees with disabilities tend to outperform people without disability. True or false? No one wants to answer anymore.
No idea. Yeah, there's a third choice, right? No idea.
No idea. Who says no idea?
Right.
True or false? False. Okay, thank you. Think again, it's true. The U.S. Department of Labor did a report finding people with disabilities meet or exceed the job performance of their coworkers without. Maybe because they have to work so much harder to even get in the door. Maybe. I don't know. All right, next. Instead of using the term handicapped person, a correct description is disabled person, true or false? Oh, we have another split ticket. Chris, you decide, true or false? Who said which, like who said false? False, okay, false.
False is louder in this room. Let's see.
It's true. This is where it gets tricky and the rules keep changing a little bit. Identity first language would say disabled person. People first language would say person with a disability. How many of you thought it should have said person with a disability? I did.
Yeah.
We definitely don't say handicapped anymore. That one's clear.
Right.
That one is clear. That means handing cap in hand. That's a term for a beggar. That's where
Yeah.
handicap came from. Your cap is in your hand looking for a handout. Yeah, that's why we don't say that term anymore.
Right.
The,
But this is a good example of how things evolve.
children who point to someone with a disability in public and ask personal questions will really hurt and offend that person. True or false? False. Okay, the answer. These guys are catching on. Correct. You're right. Don't teach kids to be scared. Kids ask all kinds of things. My friend posted a toddler quiz on Facebook the other day with all these things their child said. And who's your best friend was daddy. You know, what do you like about mommy? You're old. He didn't say the nicest things. Kids have to be encouraged to be honest and open.
Well, why do you think it's easier to teach kids to ride a bike or roller skate or ice skate when they're little? Because they fall down and get back up. They think nothing of it. But as adults, we have that fear. Why would you pass that on to your children? And to me, this is part of the issue around ignorance. I don't know it, and it's different than me, so I'm afraid of it. Children don't have that block. So let them learn about it, and all of a sudden, it becomes accepted and normal, and, oh, that person's different. Okay, fine, let's move on. You know.
And the person with a disability is going to be as likely or unlikely to engage your child's question as any stranger you happen upon that your child asks an inquiring question of. It's not going to be more or less likely because they have a disability. Some people like to share with kids and some don't. So that's how I feel about that one. Okay, the words retard, or retarded should never be used in any situation, even if referring to a situation or an object, not a person. True or false? True. Excellent. No question on that one. What's that? Dana, did you want to share?
Just to say, I would imagine that would have to be.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
thing's
that was a good one.
tricky.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for saying that, Dana. The stigma quiz is a little bit tricky. And when I first took it, I wasn't really sure how I actually felt about the trickiness of the quiz, which is kind of that we all still kind of think one way or another. All right, next and last question. Are we on the last one, Chris? 10. Statistics show people with a serious mental illness like schizophrenia are more likely to commit violent crimes. True or false? False. Correct. Next one. Proper terminology for a person confined to a wheelchair is a person who is wheelchair bound. True or false? False. It's a trick question. People are not confined or bound to their wheelchairs. I got kind of mad when I read the question the first time because I'm like, you shouldn't say, neither of that is true. So it is pointing out that it was a trick question, but it didn't fool this audience.
Right.
Last up, laws like the ADA are effective in stopping stigma. This tees up the rest of our talk, guys. Let's see, can we get it right, or does Michael have to work overtime? False. Congratulations, you're right. Keep eating your breakfast. We're good. All right, thank you. Any takeaways from that quiz? Any thoughts or feelings? You can share if you like. You don't have to. Maybe you can just share with yourself. Like I thought of, seriously, Pat.
Oh, sorry. I just think of that, trying to make sure that you are politically correct today.
Yes.
Right? And a lot of the questions in there of what I thought would be appropriate isn't necessarily appropriate. And how do you kind of go about phrasing the right things and having a conversation?
Yeah, how are you human and inclusive through a lens of politically correct language?
Yes.
Sometimes the two can butt up against each other. In the back?
My name is Cobra, and I find that some people who think that they're being nice, that say things and I think it's belittling or demeaning sometimes, when sometimes they'll say to me about some of my students or my participants, they'll say, oh, they must be so sweet and so
One more comment.
One of the things that Kobe and I run into is also educating the employers and the coworkers. They will hire our clients, but there will be things said or, oh, you know, the one over there that's got whatever, or the little retarded girl. And educate, no, you don't say that. So it's also educating. And I wish that I could take this and take it to each of the HRs. One of my HR people wants me to, okay, can you educate our management? And from the management, trickling it down to the staff, that, hey, these things are not acceptable, you can't do that. Well, why not? They're just, no.
Right.
Nobody is just anything.
Well, that's what we're out here trying to do, is get it to the HR and the management. And my friend Tony from Astera Video is filming this today for editing, so that some of this will be able to be rebroadcast for free by all of you ad hoc off of our grant employer project of our website. So with that, Michael, I think we need to move to the next
We will.
topic. Thank you.
Okay. I love the point you make about how people use political correctness, because I think it ties to the issue of education. People will use the term because they think it's the right thing to do. So the issue around stigma is often about the lack of knowledge. And so they just assume a certain thing, or that's been their orientation. It's not necessarily mean-spirited. It's just they think they're saying it the right way. So education becomes one of those things that makes a difference. Meeting people who can help them is really part of why we're here today. So one of the things that we have, and this is the 2-second, here's what's going on regulatory-wise. We have things like the ADA and the Office of CCP that ensures that companies are following the laws. And a lot of us have grown up in an environment where disabilities were something we were not going to be talking about, right? Now ADA says, no, companies need to be able to help accommodate and do some things in support of people, so they need to know more about what accommodations and what disabilities employees and candidates have. But things like HIPAA, which have to do with medical privacy, is one component of it, was about not telling people things. And GINA, which has to do with genetic information, is about not telling people things. So we have this little contradiction around what we should be talking about and not talking about. And then what it gets to is this question about the difference between self-ID and disclosure. So self-ID, and the government requires that we offer people the chance to identify themselves as an individual with a disability, is different than disclosure, where you tell people what exactly it is that your disability is. So think of it as, I'm calling in sick. Okay, I'm sick. Do you need to know what I'm sick with? But we say, oh, what's wrong with you? So there's this line about trying to accommodate people and have policies and practices that work, and yet there's the, how much information do I share, right? So I'm taking my mother to the doctor, so I need the day off. Okay, do you need to know it's an oncologist? And, right? I mean, there's information that we share. Why do we share it? Because we tend to care, the people we work with. So a lot of it's done from a caring point of view. I want to know more about you. But that information, once it's in the workplace, has the possibility of being misused. And so the idea is that you need to tell enough, but not too much. And not to be uncaring, but to say, I don't really need to know what's wrong. So, you know, how was your experience with that colonoscopy? Do I really want to know? But you know that the day after, that employee is going to be telling people about how good the drug was that put them out and how the experience was, right? They share, and people will ask. But that's where you end up in a situation where there may be information that in an employment context gets misused. So that's where educating managers and employees about, it's not that I don't care, but it's information I don't need. Okay?
Right. And the stigma part of this is for the person with a disability that learned like we did for years under the ADA, that's more than 20 years old now. We learned for years, do not ask if there's a disability until after the time of hire, right? And then along came the OFCCP's 7% mandate and says you got to keep track of how many people you're recruiting and offering jobs to who have disabilities. Well, if you're keeping track of it, you've got to ask. So the Department of Justice got together with the EEOC people, and they, in the Department of Labor, and they all struck this new deal where the voluntary self-ID form that's in your packet is something that you're allowed to put on your website for recruiting. You're now allowed to say, Chris, you're applying for a job here. Do you or don't you want to disclose if you have a disability? Now, Chris was taught for years, don't tell them until you get there. And now he's seeing this on the website, and he doesn't know, is this a trick? Is there going to be stigma? Is there going to be reverse good benefit because the company's looking for people with disabilities? No one quite knows what to make of this.
So when you have a form that you're required to put out there, and we're telling people that we'd like you to complete it, one of the pieces that we miss is to say what happens with that information. So there are a lot of people that distrust where information is. So in your policy and process, it should say, this information is collected, but it is put in a separate file. Like many companies have a separate medical file. But employees don't necessarily realize that. And it might be in some policy or place that has to do with files, but it should be in the place that talks about this information on your recruiting website. When it's collected, where does it go? Who sees it? When it's done internally for accommodations, where does it go? Who sees it? We know the answers to that because we're the ones administering it, but the skepticism of the employees is there because they don't know. And it's not like they've done it 10 times and they're used to it. Usually, the first time, well, self-ID is voluntary. If they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to say anything.
But they need to be able to do this too if they're going to need accommodations to even apply for the job.
That's right.
Right. So, but if I don't need an accommodation, but I have a situation, I may not self-ID. I may wait until I need an accommodation, and then I'm going to step forward. So one of the issues around being prepared is to know that people have, would you want to know if you have employees in the office who have a peanut allergy and need an EpiPen kind of administration? Did you want to know that?
Sure, absolutely.
But how would you know that if they don't tell anyone? It's in your purse. Well, okay, somebody needs to know. Are you going to tell your friend? Are you going to tell your supervisor? You tell the HR director? The safety manager? Who would you tell? That's life and death. Where does that information go? Well, you don't want the whole office to be talking about, oh man, don't bring in peanuts because Sally's got a problem, Like, what do you want to do? You have to create a safe environment where people know they can give you that information and you will use it properly and put it in a place that doesn't matter, right?
So Michael, who's going to create that safe environment? The employer? The community of service providers?
Well, we'll start with all the people here.
Okay. Yes, all of you here. Create the safe environment.
So 25 years, when Janet before said about, we have some success, what we have to think about, to me, this is about a milestone. Once it was the law, now 25 years is a milestone, but success is still ahead of us. We still have a long way to go, even though we've done a lot of these things. And I think what you'll find now is that when we talk about other employment situations, there are people who do not have a disability today, but they will have one tomorrow. We know as we get older, things happen. And so when we think about some of our other employment categories that don't change, this is one that changes. So what we're going to see is more people are going to need more things, and the expectations that they're there are going to be expected. There are kids coming up through school who have all sorts of accommodations for test taking and for studying that employers are not prepared for. So the universities are. Then the kids go to employment. They go, well, wait a minute. What do you mean I can't, do this? They've had it all through school. So we're going to have to raise our game. But to me, part of it is just embracing it as being normal, right? We had a situation with I'm going to say a tall woman who needed her desktop raised because she couldn't sit at the cube space like everybody else. We didn't make a big deal of it. She asked the person in facilities, they had the people who set up the cubes, raise the tabletop. Right? That's an accommodation. But it wasn't because we categorized her as a tall woman. I mean, it was because she needed it, she asked for it, and we did it. Many accommodations don't cost a lot of money, and they fit in among all the things that we do. So I wanted to differentiate, as we talk about the broad approach, that the solutions, you have to look at the group of people who it most affects. So you have current employees and you have candidates, because we're required for accommodations to consider for both. But how you get there is very different, because the people who are your current employees are people you know, they're people who are trained and competent, and they could be your friends at work. So the idea that you'd have an accommodation is a no-brainer. Well, of course we would. We know that they know that they're valuable to the company. And how you find out about the accommodation could come from many different directions. And the basic philosophy is, if there's a request, well, we need to try, right? We know this person, we're committed to them. Candidate side, very different, right? Because we're only meeting somebody during an interview, and we know in an interview it's not necessarily an accurate representation of that person, right? We've hired some people we think would be rock stars that turn out not to be, and we've met some people that weren't that impressive that turn out to be awesome, right? You don't know their capabilities, even though you're asking them. They haven't done the job, and they have no work history. So you really have nothing to go on. When you think or you enter into that space, you're not even sure what to ask, because one of the challenges with disabilities is that it's not like, when Janet said, well, what do we do for women? Well, there are certain things around pregnancy leave that you'd say, well, for many women, pregnancy leave, there are some things we could do that collectively as a group will help. Disabilities is more individualized. Everyone needs something different. So I love the way you said before, we should deal with people as individuals, as persons, people. That's the challenge here. It's not about having a broad, we do this. It's the interactive process, but the solution is going to be different and unique and special, but appropriate, and that's our challenge. Okay?
I'd like to throw out a practical tip right there. Companies, when they come to us and say, we want to hire and recruit more people with disabilities, where do we start? They often think, we're going to start by buying up a whole bunch of accommodations, and we're going to have them in a room, and we're going to have somebody, so man, you walk in the door and you've got a visual impairment, we've got what you need. Well, like Michael just said, it's not that easy to, you need to meet the person and know what they ask for and then put it out there for them. Disability is not so similar person to person that you can just have everything in a drawer. Now what you want to do is get somebody trained up and have a go-to person, have a department that handles accommodations, and then they want to know how to reach out onto the internet and reach out into their bag of tricks and figure things out and get creative and tap the interactive process of the ADA, which is just a fancy term for everybody needs to get together and talk about this. Right. And when y'all can't figure it out, you got to go to somebody else who might have a better idea. That's the interactive process. You cannot buy up everything you'll need in advance, or you're going to buy up a lot of stuff nobody knows how to use or may never touch.
Right. So when you have managers that think it takes extra work, so they want to avoid hiring people with disabilities, this is the one thing you have to watch out for. Oh, this is too difficult. Well, it's no different than saying, well, I'm taking classes at night, so I need to leave at 4 o'clock on Thursdays. When you negotiate and hire people, we make accommodations for all sorts of things. So why would this be any different? But they don't know enough about it, and so they say, well, let me go to other candidates. That's not allowed, right? So we have to get them comfortable to bring it up so we can resolve it. So one of the things that we started talking about a little earlier is this idea about visible and hidden, right? We asked about some different kinds of disabilities. So the issue for us at work is that we see you, but we don't necessarily know what we don't see in terms of your own personal issues. And we also don't see what's going on in the rest of your life. So what you, I'll ask you, I have a couple of things. Let's ask, how many people know someone at work who uses a wheelchair? How many people know someone at home who uses a wheelchair? All right. Does anybody know an amputee, artificial limb at work? How about at home? Anybody know anyone blind at work? How about at home? Anybody know someone with MS at work? How about at home? Cancer survivor at work? How about at home? Fibromyalgia? Fibromyalgia at work? At home. Okay. How about high blood pressure? At home? So what I found is that, and I had a group of them, some of these are things that you would see, right? I can see a wheelchair. I can see certain things. Can I see high blood pressure? Can I see fibromyalgia? But these are medical conditions that progress. And so at the beginning, you may not need an accommodation because you're fine, you're being treated. But at some point, maybe you need some help. So what you find with visible disabilities is that there are things that are already in place, ramps, bathroom doors, things that work to grant access, right? And they're easily accepted and understood because we could see it. Why wouldn't we do it, right? But when you get to hidden disabilities, they're more customized, and often people don't want everyone to know that they have this condition or this situation, right? So you get into the idea of, the sharing it in a work group violate privacy. Well, I tell Janet because she's my friend, but then once Janet knows it, she doesn't realize that I only told her because she's my friend, and it happens to come up, So this is where this invisible and visible and hidden, becomes a challenge because there's a lot of things that are hidden that we just don't know.
And I think that's one issue with a lot of companies that probably have more individuals with disabilities than they think they have because they have employees that have acquired disabilities, whether it's through aging or whatever. And there needs to be a way that companies, first of all, there needs to be a way that employees feel comfortable in being able to share those things and not fear some type of retaliation and so forth. But companies need to be also more proactive in trying to help those individuals because their work may be falling down because they may need accommodation but they're afraid to do it. So what are some of the things that tips that you might could give supervisors or companies or whatever in helping employees that are already there, that have been there maybe for years and feeling more comfortable in sharing those type of things?
Go first?
Yes, and I think we might actually have a slide that
I
has
think
some.
we might have a slide. We might just have a slide about that. Chris will check. One tip is during the interview or the hiring process, you do onboarding, you do orientation. Hey, if anyone has a disability of any type and needs an accommodation, here's our process. Right. And then you might want to go so far as to say, we get, obviously we have ramps and elevators and, things that are mandated as far as physical site accommodations. But, we have someone that you can talk to if you've got a visual impairment that we might not even know about. If you need an accommodation for a hidden disability, don't be afraid to let us know. We want you to be productive. You can state that during onboarding. Now, some of you are probably going, oh, they're going to come up with a letter of request if I do that. Wouldn't you rather know, check the box, have the diversity, and help the person have what they need to do a good job? Because they still have to then take what you accommodated them with and do a really good job.
What if they have been employed, though, and they've acquired a disability during this?
Well, you have to let them know. And the 7% rule says that you can survey people how often?
5 years. 5 years.
Every 5 years you can do a new survey. I think the more people start to notice that the company will give you something to help you at work if you talk about it, it's a cultural shift and people start asking. Years ago, maybe 12 years ago, we did a project with Aetna up in Hartford, and we helped a person with a severe disability get accommodated and do her job. The ergonomics manager said, how can we prevent injury in the same way? They did a proactive study. They called it the Ergo Annie Quiz. It went out to everyone that was likely in the targeted group that was likely to develop carpal tunnel or other repetitive stress injuries, offering them, call this number to get a desk side assessment, maybe a special keyboard or a certain mouse will help you do your job more comfortably. What they found, well, sure, they spent a lot of money on some keyboards and some mice devices. You know what they also found? They saved huge money on their workers' comp because they were self-insured, and the amount of claims went down. So that's where the employer has to get over being afraid to ask, because there's a little bit of that too. If we're not asking them and they're not asking us, then we can skate right by this accommodation request. But really, you want to be asked. You can, as a manager, say, hey, Chris, I notice you really are having a hard time with your voicemail and your phone calls. Do you need some sort of accommodation on your telephone? Maybe an amplification or a noise canceling device. I'm allowed to say, I notice you're having a difficulty. Do you need something? I didn't ask him if he was disabled. I asked him if he needed something. Could be tricky, but...
And I think we have some cases, there are a number of situations, and John and I always talk about how there may be a reason why a request comes up, but the benefit of that request is something that falls to all people. So we have a situation where somebody was having difficulty with the bright lights. They had a visual impairment, and the lights were very bright. And it turned out that a lot of other people didn't like the lights, but they kind of accepted it. So when they came up with a softer lighting, because that employee raised the issue, and the company said, well, it's an accommodation, let's look into it, it benefited everybody on the floor who was there. So when ADA started, it was all about making a curb cut in the sidewalks so people with wheelchairs, right? But it doesn't say wheelchairs only, right? We now all use it. It's skateboards, it's baby carriages, it's any number of luggage, right? We all benefit from that. But it started because there was a group that said, you know, I need some assistance. But we all benefit. And that's why, to me, a lot of this, when you look at what you're doing, when you talk about injuries, it used to be only the big men worked in the warehouse because they had to lift things. But they would also hurt their backs. So all of a sudden they come up with hydraulics, right? You ever see a pallet mover in a warehouse? You squeeze the handle and it just goes. You could be 82 pounds and move that thing. You don't need to be a big, strong guy. And there's fewer injuries. So a lot of the issues that get raised because someone has an accommodation request benefits everybody.
The thing I've always thought was so funny was when restaurants or other businesses don't want to put a ramp in, but they said, but you can come in the back and come in our back ramp.
Right.
They got a ramp in the back, but they don't want to put one in the front.
Right. So the other thing, and Janet mentioned something about technology, there are a lot of technologies that would be beneficial to the workforce. You need you need a friend in IT, someone who has the responsibility to be up to date on how those things work. Because like all the technology, it's always evolving. So somebody would need to know how to install it, how it's used. We may have a good idea in HR and we may have a request, but there's a lot of IT kind of enabled speech recognition and some other things that you need an IT friend. You have a copy of this among the papers. This is just, I believe in practical worksheets. The idea that you'd say, how are we accommodating somebody with a visible disability who's an employee? How would we be handling a visible disability for a candidate? And the same thing with a hidden. So it's sort of like, think about what you're doing today and fill in the box.
And for the external candidate, are you asking before the interview, like, hey Barry, this is Janet, and I'm calling because I got your resume, and it looks like I'd like to call you in for an interview. Barry's going to be nervous and excited at the same time, of course, right? Because I'm a job interview calling. And he's not going to go, oh, by the way, I need my information in Braille. He's not going to think of that. Like, are you asking a standard question? Barry, we need any type of accommodation that day. Because if you're not, then he might show up and you're going to feel underprepared and he's going to feel awkward. And if, go ahead and ask.
And now we're doing video interviews, some companies. I mean, it raises a whole issue about, people may need different accommodation, absolutely. So,
yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
So here's part of the answer. I knew we had a slide that would help get at that. So,
Study.
well, there we go. There was a group of, there were people who, this is what they do all the time, right? So the things that, for policies and practices that are rated most effective, have a centralized accommodation fund. Sometimes there's money that you need to buy something. Don't penalize the department. Don't let them have to make an economic decision. Have some money put aside for that. Have a designated office or a person to address accommodations. So part of the ability of feeling it's safe is to know that there's someone who does it. And it doesn't have to be a full-time job, but it should be, when you look at your org chart, you look at your e-signatures and things like that, that somebody has a special role as, the administrator for accommodations, right? And the idea that you have a formal process, that somewhere, it just doesn't say we accommodate, but it explains, who you talk to, and that there's some review and medical involvement, or, some other consideration, that there's something there that people will go to, because where people don't want to speak up, they do research. Well, let me see what it says the company does. Let me go on the website. Let me find this out. So you want to put something out there that explains not just the commitment spiritually, because companies will say, yes, we support it, but it gives a little bit more meat for how it's done, and that it's supported as an activity. So these are the things that are considered very effective. And I think, to me, these are not hard things to do. But it more formalizes it and makes it so that people will believe you when you say, we support accommodations.
We support silencing cell phones too. so-
There you go. Yeah. So, and this is kind of the example we just gave about, somebody getting deadening headphones. I mean, you have people who work in open cube spaces, which some of the space people thought was a wonderful idea because it saved space. But what did it do? It increased noise,
Right.
right? And one of the things about this particular situation is that other people didn't realize how troubling it was to that individual. So, you don't want pain for your coworkers. I didn't know it was a problem. Once you did, okay, why don't we adjust, right? People want to be supportive.
Totally easy. Easy to adjust, sometimes just common sense
Right.
will do it.
And, here again, here's another, I'll call it easy example where you have cubes in places where somebody's on the aisle and somebody's not. If you have somebody who has an attention issue, well, don't put them on the aisle. But you wouldn't know it if they don't say anything. But it's an easy accommodation. And we had, sometimes where people are placed on the floor makes a difference. So when you're doing new floor plans, new seating, new moves, you have to say, by the way, if anybody needs a special accommodation,
Right.
please let us know before we put everybody in the seats. But I can tell you that that's not typically what you get. What you get is a schedule of when you're boxing up and putting numbers on it and where you're going to be. They don't ask who needs something.
The most common request I get from businesses trying to accommodate, the most common question, is ADD really a disability, Janet?
Yeah.
Do we really have to do something about that?
Right.
Well, you got to go back to, does it affect a major bodily function and a major life activity? If it affects a major bodily function and a major life activity, there's a list of those. We can, in the thank you note that you'll get a link that takes you right there. Well, then, yes, it might be a disability that you need to deal with, and with attention deficit, most likely it is.
Right.
It's also the one where employers, you tend to get really mad because they don't talk about it, and the person comes in and they're doing a great job, and then boom, the job changes, and then the person's confused and lost, and then you're saying, you're on write-up for not performing, and they're going, but I need an accommodation. And that's where I get the call going, Janet, this is a bunch of crap, and they're trying to say they have a disability now when they're in trouble.
Right. So the
And that's where
employers
you got to
that,
walk them off the ledge and say, well,
Right.
maybe we could just try the accommodation.
right.
Because maybe it's really real, and maybe the tensions are kind of high.
The employers that debate the diagnosis are the ones that lose every way. If you want to debate the accommodation, that's different because you're trying to accommodate. But if you're trying to prevent the person from getting an accommodation because you don't buy their disability, right? Or you don't buy their religion for religious, right?
Yeah.
When we're debating that line, you lose every time,
Yeah.
right? So, did you have a question?
Yeah, that was an interesting example. So our organization has very open environment. That's one of our values. It's on our website. So how would we handle a situation like that? So when we're onboarding people or even interviewing people, we make sure that they understand this is a very open space. There's no cubicles at all. No one sits in an office, so sometimes it does get very loud. So that's one of the things you have to be accepting of when when you work for the company. But how would we address something like that if someone was disabled?
Well, I mean, do you have a policy that says you can't wear earbuds at work? I mean, some companies say you can't do that. You can't have earbuds and listen to music at work because you're supposed to be paying attention. But that's how people block out the noise. So you would just be able to say, by the way, this is a very vibrant, active environment, and sometimes people think it gets a little noisy. And if you need on a particular day, the work you're doing, we have ways to accommodate that. Whether it's sitting in a different place, working from home, earbuds. And you have, it depends what people want. Sometimes it's a matter of, Janet's just loud. Like, can I just sit next to, well, there are some people who have like a piercing voice. I work with a woman who has a laugh that doesn't matter where she is on the floor, you can hear it. The accommodation is not to get rid of her, right? I just have to sit in a different place, right? So you have to have a few options and be prepared with them and say, if you need it, here's what we'll do.
And the earbud example is a great one. We've also taken that to a heightened level with the large Bose noise canceling microphones with white noise. And that has a double benefit. It blocks it out. The sheer factor that you have something on your ears is psychologically making you're blocked from the outside world more than the small bud, but it's letting others know you can't hear them.
Right.
So people aren't bothering you as much, which is another factor.
And the other aspect of technology is people use instant messaging in the office. So instead of popping by, hey, Chris, can I talk to you? I'm just going to shoot Chris a little IM and say, hey, are you there? Can you send me such and such a thing? So some of those little sidebar conversations that you might have, this way people can protect, sort of keep the noise out and yet still have, conversation.
One issue that when you're talking about the disabilities, sometimes they'll say, well, why does she need that disability when does she need that accommodation? Because she's diabetic, because Sue down here is a diabetic and she doesn't need that accommodation. Or this other person works here that has cerebral palsy and they don't have to have that accommodation. You have to also realize that things are individualized.
Right.
Everybody with cerebral palsy
Yep.
are not alike.
Absolutely. And one of our last slides, I have something exactly on that point, which is, it's not a group, it's an individual thing, and it has to be a reasonable and fair situation. And it's with the idea that, well, she needs an accommodation now. When you need one, come see me.
Right.
I mean, it's not like I only have one and she gets it and you don't. It's right. It's what do you need and when. And it fits in the same category. People say, well, I love all my children, but I love them differently. They have different needs. It's the same thing. It's that we're not denying you something because I'm giving it to someone else. What do you need? If you don't need it, then why are you stockpiling it? Right? So there are a bunch of things that HR people do. In terms of how you're focused on groups. What kind of activities you have, and this is really meant as a little bit of a checklist about where you go for openness and accommodations and training. Right, these are the things that we really need to do to satisfy our responsibilities. So we talk about policies and practices. One of the things about disability is that when you ask people about diversity, sometimes they're going to talk about gender and race, maybe national origin, LGBT. What happened to disabilities? A lot of times it doesn't end up being included. So when you think about your hiring, recruitment, diversity, inclusion, career development, there's a bunch of places where that should be part of that discussion around what people are doing to either support it or to make sure that we have employees in those areas. The thing about metrics and analytics that's interesting is now with the 7% idea, where before we just said, well, we support disabilities and hiring people, there was no measure of it. There were no numbers. Now, companies have numbers. So you'd be able to look at some point, well, how many self-identified, right, because self-identified is a limit, self-identified people with disabilities got promoted. How many people who didn't self-identify got promoted? All of a sudden you can start to look at treatment and look at metrics. that we don't have. We do it now for race, for gender, right? Anybody does affirmative action planning or other things, all of a sudden you'll be able to do it for veterans and individuals with disabilities that we never could do before. So it challenges us to say, hey, how are we doing with that?
Do we want to actually ask the audience that question? How are we doing with that? Is it kind of nice that we can now track so that we know? Is the new rule to track how many people with disabilities are getting hired in your workforce, does that feel like it's giving you an opportunity as a company and a busy person to actually have a box that you check, and when you have a box you have to check, you have actions that you have to take? Or is it making it one more thing you don't want to do? Is that going to help? Is it going to hurt? Do we really have a choice?
I just think it really depends on the overall culture of the company and the organization that you work with. Because, you know, whether it's race or gender, you check the boxes, okay, in there and saying, yes, I have these people that have applied that are on my team, but I don't know, I just think it really just, you know, whether those metrics really mean something, I think it just sends back to the overall culture of the company.
Yes.
Yep.
Christy?
I would agree. However, I'm a proponent of aspirational goals. I think it's important for companies to have something to aspire to,
Yes.
and know, you know, this may be our baseline, but we want to go above and beyond. So 7% may be our baseline, but we know that, you know, up to 19% of people in the U.S. have a disability. So why not let that be your goal?
Right.
You know, and so it does depend on the culture, but I think generally speaking, the majority of companies are not where they need to be around diversity. So having something to reach for and know that this is an expectation from our executives, from upper management, and this is what you need to reach for, it gives people the incentive that they need.
Right. So right now, if we're not doing well, whether we're at 1%, 3%, 5%, 8%, like, to me, that's why the number gets tracked, but I feel like forget the number, just get better. Just do more of it. Get the number as high as you can so you can track it, but it's not like at 7 we go, okay, good, we got this, you know, that's not success. We still have a lot of room to go. And, you know, when you think about the things that make a very effective place, these ideas about having, you mentioned an employee resource group, right? Having flexible work arrangements that help people. You know, mentoring individuals with disabilities, be involved in mentoring programs, right? There are certain places where people might get excluded. Why? And having a return to work program that is not about terminating people who don't come back 100%. It's about helping people transition back to work in whatever accommodation. These are things that help companies be successful. So you said the magic word, you said culture. Give her a free pen.
It's a pen, yeah.
Right? Because that's really, if the culture is good around support, I mean, go look at your websites. I'm sure it has people of color, men and women. Does it have anybody with a visible disability? Right? So you want to engage your employees in this whole thing, because we can't, it's not like a management edict. People have to want to support each other and help with it. You want to improve your culture, and here we go to, you know, you want to be supportive but not prying. You want to accommodate and be fair, but it's not about equal, it's about reasonable. Those are the things that are going to feel right when you're doing this. Every company's different, so you're going to have to define your own challenges, where you need to be. Set some realistic expectations, short and long term. So as Christy said, right? Where's that number going to be? Well, we want to get one foot in front of the other, build some positive momentum, keep your eye on the goal, count your successes, let people know that you've been successful, because a lot of times they don't realize these activities because they tend to be personal and individualized. So you want to let some folks know how you've done and how easy it was, how surprising it was, how cooperative people were. Reinforce the positive things so people will be less fearful of it and more participative.
Love it.
Oh, we have resources.
Yes, we have resources, and the resources will be emailed to all of you. We've got all your contact info. So we're going to send you a slide so you have a hyperlink to all the resources. You can keep it in your Outlook or save it to your desktop, wherever you like it. If you all could take a moment before you go and fill out your survey, it would be appreciated. And when you're filling out your survey, if you would like more of this, if you want this repeated at your place of business, whatever you heard that you wish somebody you knew could have had, jot it down on there and we will reach out to you. We will be editing this particular presentation. Our grant-funded part of the Sierra Group Foundation website, the part called Employment Project, already has a whole bunch of resources and hyperlinks to past events that you can watch. You can show your friends, family, co-workers, and the people whose lives you're trying to enlighten.
Including the stigma quiz.
Including the
Right?
stigma quiz.
So,
Absolutely.
think about, Chris
The
connected
holidays
us
are
right
coming.
there, but there you
Families need
go.
a little game to play together.
Right, eggnog and stigma quiz.
Exactly, exactly. But on behalf of the Sierra Group Foundation, the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council, I want to give a warm thanks to Michael Furman. Thank you.